So basically they were throwing the book at me and saying, we've got no money, and how are we going to pay you? We've got no money. We can't, and they just were basically wanting to give me, no notice and no money and see you later. And I went up to my lawyer about an hour's drive up the road in St. Albans, and he said, okay, well, this is complete bullshit. So you've got, either they've got no money. He said, get them on a fork. I can't remember the term he used, but it was fantastic. It was to do with a fork. So he said, you establish certain things, and he said either this or that, and that's how you kind of get them. So I said, so either you have no money. That's true, right? So if that's true, you have no money, then you're trading insolvently. Or you have money, and you're not paying out redundancy.
Yeah.
Either way, I've got friends in the media, and this is going to get ugly. Hi everyone, welcome. So we are on Facebook Live, and will be recorded up onto the YouTube channel, the Rooibos with Simon Small YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. Today is an exciting day. We are talking about the sharp end of the employment stick and the business building stick, and that is redundancies. One of the reasons we're talking about this today is that I have noticed that New Zealand is very, very quiet, and there's not a lot of kind of coming forward to chat. So I thought what we'd do today is I'd share some war stories about being in dead-end careers and being made redundant. And I'm joined today by a very special guest. I'm going to welcome him in. You may have seen him yesterday on the show, Mr. Kane Fletcher. Come on in, Kane Fletcher. Just while Kane's actually joining us, I'm interested in your redundancy stories, or what you may have gone through that might help other people. Redundancy is one of those things that can be, can have quite a big impact on us mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Welcome, Kane.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kei te pia koe.
Kei te pai.
Kei te pai. Did you learn te reo in the hospitality kind of tourism sort of mode, or personally? Oh, you're actually going to go on and study. You're studying, right?
Yeah. So I learned to pick up a little bit through being in tourism. Obviously trying to share the culture with our visitors, and then currently studying with SIT and Te Wananga o Aotearoa. So. Cool.
Fantastic. So welcome back. So I guess just would be a nice place to start is since our chat yesterday, what cogs got whirring overnight, and how did you wake up this morning?
Yeah, good. I think it sort of refreshed me a little, gave me a little bit more energy after our chat yesterday. And what I've taken out of it is it's okay to be where I am at the moment, and to pause and just actually think about what I want long term.
Yeah. I was thinking back to like one of the. It's interesting. Often with careers, we tell the kind of the positive path, and we don't spend so long telling the negative path.
Yeah.
And careers do have positive and negatives, right?
Totally.
And I also think we don't talk enough about the redundancy kind of process, or the getting fired process. We talk a lot more about getting hired or starting a business. Right? Talk about how do you wind up a failed business. It's not really part of our. Let me tell you how I wound up my business that failed. So when I was telling you the story yesterday about getting into the sort of the peak of the interactive TV industry, I realized that in that space where we were uploading software to the satellite and down to set-top boxes for Sky Digital in the UK that had just launched, and I was on that path for about 5 years, and I went from a few companies, went into Sky and then went to a company that was providing services to Sky. But that industry, to me, really went from, here's this exciting, I can travel the world and go speak at conferences in America. I can, do all these cool things down in Cannes around TV broadcasters who want to make their channels interactive, and, with the TV festivals down there. And you sort of felt like you're flying high. But the canary in the mine shaft is that, hang on, we have to put software onto every single set-top box that's out there, even the crappy old ones that just keep failing continuously. We have to make our software work for the lowest common denominator. It is the complete opposite of the phone situation, where Apple keeps you in a non-legacy bubble by just sort of going, okay, this phone is gonna the software. This is why people hate Apple. But why it's such a powerful platform is that every 2 to 3 years, you've got to just keep moving with it, because they only want to make for the immediate ecosystem. And so Sky Digital is the complete opposite. You have to make for everything out there, because we don't want to pay Mrs. Jones to give her a new set-top box. We want that set-top box she got 5 years ago, that crappy Amstrad, to just live for 20 years. So we're building a legacy platform. So this is kind of full circle to what I was talking to my son about before you joined yesterday, about the fundamental difference between a Netflix model and a Sky model.
Yeah.
Netflix is always on the latest TVs, so you don't have to set top box, So the bubble was bursting when I saw that we were not going to get anywhere with technology on the Sky Digital platform, and all broadcasters are on these arcane digital TV platforms. And then also my role, I was like in a kind of you could say I painted a role for myself, but I ended up painting it myself into a corner where, yes, I was getting well paid. Yes, I was running a team. Yes, I was a senior manager of member of the company, but ultimately the business we were doing wasn't, I wasn't stretched. I wasn't giving my best. And so I felt kind of in a bit of a slump, and then that's not a good way to lead a team. But if you'd said to me 5 years earlier, you're going to have this role and you get paid, a lot of money, then even by today's standard, then, you'd be, I'd be really, really happy with that scenario. So my parents had come over, it was about 2003, I think. And we were just walking around Richmond Park, which is a massive old Henry VIII hunting ground. I don't know if you know, I don't know if you know Richmond Park, but in London, but there's deer running through it, there's lakes, there's hills, there's little forests, wild grass. And I just remember it was a hot day, it was in summer, and I was just sharing that I just felt at a total dead end. I didn't want to lose the income, kind of needed the income. But in the industry, I honestly I didn't know anywhere that I wanted to go. And then I just was staring into the sort of off the cliff and just going, I don't know how to move from here. I've climbed all this way and I just and they just, my dad was a guidance counselor and trained guidance counselor. That was his PhD in the 50s in the US. And he said, they both just said, look, something will happen, something will come along. And I'm saying those words today because I kind of was reflecting as I was walking here. I was just thinking, well, that sometimes parents just say those things and they can shift your whole state. So that was kind of on my mind today to use, like, and that's what I said in that message, like something will come along.
Yes.
But let's talk about redundancies. Do you want to go? And also, if you're watching, just text 0204 139 882, 0204 139 882, and we'll bring your questions in. So, is there anything you want to share, or would you rather me go first on some redundancy stories?
Yeah, for me, I guess the redundancy process was all fairly unknown to me. So I've been lucky enough to be moving through my career and moving through roles without being involved in any redundancies. So it was a learning experience to go through it. And there's two parts to it, because I was going through it myself, and I was going through it with a team of people that reported through to me. So I've seen it from both sides. One of the things that I took out of it, and my mother's the same as your parents in terms of it doesn't matter what I do. She sort of reinforces any decision I make by saying that it's the right decision. It's the right decision.
As long as you're selling heroin on the streets.
Yeah. But what one of the things, because you do go through a bit of an emotional roller coaster as you're going through these things. It's a grieving process, and I reminded myself and a team of people that was a process that we needed to go through. It was okay to be angry. It was okay to be sad. It was okay to have all of these things. But we just needed to make sure that we're actually working through them and not holding on to them or stalling at one particular stage in that process. And I was thinking about it. The word redundancy sort of comes with a bit of stigma as well. So, I found myself driving around town sort of almost embarrassed and not wanting to be seen, because people would have known that where I was in my position.
Yeah.
And even when you look at the word redundant in a dictionary, it means of no use, where people that are made redundant aren't of no use. It's just the position they're in or the employment they're in. Obviously, is not tenurable, so that has to come to an end. But the person themselves not redundant. People are useful.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, I think there's different types of redundancies. There's the redundancies where the company's shrinking and it has to sort of actually control some costs, and so in many ways there's no reason to. I mean, there's no reason to let somebody go, but so they can't be fired. And so then there's a process of, well, how can we make, it's just an engineered kind of dismissal, really. So how can we make, how can we save that head count, and how can we make sure that position is strictly redundant, and so then that person gets and then that person goes through the HR process. It's just a completely engineered sort of way of, I think, firing people. But the other part is where it really is kind of a tidal wave on the company, and there's a mass process to kind of go through, which sounds like the one that you're in, and that's very hard, because I was, so the company that I was talking about earlier, we shrunk from, over a few years, from 200 to about 50. And
Right.
so it was just like this constant, almost like every 3 or 4 months we're going through another redundancy phase to get rid of 10 people. And so I was on the other side for some of that, where it's so cold. It's just like, here's your spreadsheet, pick out the people and save that amount, have the conversations, and then you're changing lives. You get caught, from your experience, you get caught into a meeting, and you just don't know at that moment what's going to be said, because everything has to be kept in secrecy.
Yeah.
And no one knows until they go into the meeting, and everybody's got to be sort of on these sort of processes they've got to follow. Yeah, I guess it's a kind of a necessary employment law process, but it's brutal on all sides in a way. So one of the things I think with the redundancy process, for me, I got made redundant right in the middle of that sort of interactive TV kind of story. I left Sky, went to a .com in the middle of 2000, which was when the .com crash happened. In fact, I'd given my notice at Sky, going to this .com, and it's in London, and because it seemed like the promised land, and a kind of a coder guy, I was going to say a geek, but a development guy, just at Sky, who was contracting to Sky. I was talking with him in the cafe, just got £5 million for kind of, it felt like one piece of paper that he presented to some people in the city of London, £5 million for his new business. So I just thought it was the promised land. So I jumped in. But as I jumped in, like I hadn't even left Sky, and the .com crash had started to happen in the newspapers. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go into this company. Went in for within 3 months. In fact, it was 3 months pretty much to the day when I was coming into that meeting. And I think these guys had missed the cutoff by a couple of days. So they could have given me one week's redundancy. But because I'd been there for just over 3 months, and they'd sort of dragged the process out a bit, I was eligible for 3 months' pay. But this was my first encounter with nefarious operators in the employment space. I mean, these guys had, they brought me into this fancy boardroom in a sort of a private equity kind of part of town near Holborn, and I had suggested to the team that I was part of that we should all bandy up, get the same legal advice. And they said, "Oh, no, you go your own way, Kiwi. We've got this." I ended up getting the best deal. So basically, they were throwing the book at me and saying, "We've got no money, and how are we going to pay you? We've got no money. We can't, and they just were basically wanting to give me, no notice and no money, and see you later." And I went up to my lawyer about an hour's drive up the road in St. Albans, and he said, "Okay, well, this is complete bullshit. So you've got either they've got no money." He said, get them on a fork. I can't remember the term he used, but it was fantastic. It was to do with a fork. So he said, you establish certain things, and he said either this or that, and that's how you kind of get them. So I said, so either you either you have no money. Either that's true, right? So if that's true, you have no money, then you're trading insolvently. Or you have money, and you're not, and you're not paying out redundancy.
Yeah.
Either way, I've got friends in the media, and this is going to get ugly. Oh, you can't do this. You can't threaten us. And I got a great payout. I mean, what I was deserved.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just that horrific sort of feeling afterwards, that the sense of shame that I was redundant, that I had been kicked out. I mean, again, it's a little bit like yours in that the whole company kind of got wiped out there. But it's certainly just hit me really, really hard. And where I went after that was, it's ironic because we were having that conversation yesterday about the software company. I went to a software company that had been trying to sell software to Sky. And I said, hey guys, I'm available. I can help you get deals with Sky, because obviously I know everybody there. This little .com thing blew up. So, they don't care. This is also to the point we were talking about yesterday. They don't care about that little mission I went on going to the .com world for sort of 3 or 4 months. What they care about is what their primary goal is to get a carriage deal with Sky, get stuff on Sky. And that was the company that I stayed with right through. So I think the redundancy thing is tied with, is the career a future focused kind of career, or are you in a sunset industry, or are you in a backwater industry? And I guess what I mean by that is, I was about a year into the interactive TV world. I come from obscurity, making regional television in Southland, and so I had made so much progress, and I was actually, all that knowledge and all those contacts were incredibly invaluable, and because Sky was such a closed book, and so it was so hard for companies to break in, whereas I just walk around the Sky campus all day long, meeting people, chatting, and doing work for this other company, because they were happy as long as I was at Sky, just having coffees, because it meant something was getting done, right? And some bridge building, and they had no credibility with Sky. So, and it was becoming the dominant digital TV platform. So that industry was, for me, I was on an upswing in that industry. And then the bit where I said I was lost was, a few years later, and just realizing that this is not, actually the industry is not going to support my career. If I look at the industry and I go, I don't think there's a single company that I want to work for in this industry. It's generally a sign that it's just over for me, right? Yeah. So that's kind of that's the industry sector, and then so that became a sunset industry. 2 or 3 years later, it had scandals with people charging too much to pay to vote and ripping people off, but it just wasn't going to work. People interacting, leaning forward, they just want to veg out, and chill out when they're watching TV. Think about Netflix. You don't really want to interact. You just want to play it, pause it, go to the bathroom, come back, unpause it. So there were lots of sort of lessons to learn in that industry, and yeah, so it became a bit of a sunset industry. Some people are starting to bring it back, but it's never going to work. Interactive TV. So then I also said about the backwater industries, and I guess what I mean by that is what is that it could come again. So, you know, one of the things is that tourism in New Zealand, well, are we saying could or would come again? I mean, it could come again, and you know, I think people want it to come again. But when we heard that people were saying hotels in Queenstown are going to be shut till 2021, and you know, New Zealand flights aren't going to fly for 18 months or whatever internationally, and it seemed quite like, wow, is it that bad? And you can, and it's interesting. Those to me were the early big indicators.
Yeah.
You know, if the big money is looked at everything and is just going slam the brakes on, you know, it's not going to be worth it. Let's set the expectations that this thing is dead for a long time. Then that to me is I'll just say a backwater industry, because it's not dead. It's not gone. When it turns on, it'll go like a rocket again, assuming we're all kind of hunky-dory on the health front. So there are plays to get yourself positioned in the right way for going again. I mean, I shouldn't really say this, but it's something that's on my mind, is consents. Why now is the time to go out and get consents? So you think about the consent process. Who objects to the consent process? Well, the other big tourism operators object to other people getting tourism consents, as well as depending on what it is. But you can't move without a consent if you want to have a tourism operation. Now's the time. People are probably unhappy. Some people will be unhappy about me saying this, but now's the time to get consents, because the objectors have their guard down, because they're just focusing on what they're focusing on. They're not in expansion mode. So if you want to open up a new area, I mean, that would be a good play. I mean, it costs, you know, depending on what it is, it could cost you $8,000 for a consent for whatever, but that consent has value, and that consent can be traded, and that consent you put in a company, that company can be sold, or that consent can be assigned for a fee. So I think, you know, that's an example of kind of getting ahead of and taking advantage of this slow time, and the fact that everybody's hurting who's been making a ton of money out of consents, basically, by putting the business operations on top of the consent.
I think you're right with that. It's also those, it's about continuance. So it's the people that are able to continue going in whatever capacity that are going to stay at the forefront of the minds of agents, if there's such a thing in the future, or advertising and marketing. So long as you're operating, then you can be there. If you're not, then you know, it's harder to come back than it is to stay where you are.
It's harder to come back. What do you mean?
It's harder to start something from nothing than it is to continue something from where you're, you know, whether it's a reduced capacity, but still just keep operating in a smaller capacity. Gives you more exposure than not being there at all.
Yeah. So with the redundancy, just going back to the redundancy and the kind of the stigma around that. What's the I'd like to explore that a little, and I think it drives right into this sense of value and of worth, and it's it's probably right back to the belonging, belonging with your parents, belonging with your family, your friends that didn't invite you to the birthday party, that sense of connection with everybody. I'm being singled out. Why do I have to go? And it also gets tied into performance in a lot of ways, because even though the process of redundancy is, we're making this position redundant, it's not your fault. It always kind of it'd be like a girlfriend saying, "I don't want to see you again, but it's to do with me." It's not you, it's me. That's what the company's saying, isn't it? It's such a bastard of a thing to have to go through.
I think with the redundancies recently related to COVID, there's two parts to it, where some organisations are using this as an opportunity to downsize or to reshape their future, where the other side is there's businesses out there that just aren't operating. There's no cash coming in anymore, and the doors are closed, so you can't keep paying your employees. Regardless of which side you fall on as an employee, you're going to ask those questions of yourself as to, is there something that I could have done to make this not the end result? And I think that's a tough question that a lot of people will be facing and asking themselves, as to what could I have done differently to make a different end result in this situation.
Well, especially when you put your heart and soul into your work. It's not as if like the businesses survive with great people, and they thrive with great people, but they also die with great people. And you do go through a lot of personal sacrifice, and whether it's late nights or weekend work or just sort of supporting other colleagues, and that rug is sort of pulled out, and you just like, what the, like, yeah, it's crazy times.
Yeah. Once you work through the process, being made redundant, I think you do reflect back at the work and the dedication that you've put in, and question, what value was in that. I don't think it is an indicator to a person to stop working hard and to stop giving more, but it's definitely it's a good reality check as to where priorities should lie.
And I think your eyes are open a bit more for the next rodeo. Like, you go, so how are you funded? What's behind this company? Like stuff you just think first time round. I just kind of need to get my CV up on LinkedIn, because I've forgotten the things I've done. But I just remember being a lot sharper about how, if one company can just crash in 3 months completely, it floored me, and I was really curious to see how the next company was going to kind of fare, and that had similar troubles, but over a 5-year period, it sort of, I talked about this sort of downsizing of 200 to 50 people. But I was always conscious of, have we got enough backing? Have we got enough funding? How long's the funding going to last?
Yeah.
in a way that it hadn't before. I guess in Southland, when we're doing the TV, that was a big thing too, about 3 different owners in 5 years or 3 years. And, because the employment, and this is probably just a value for people listening in, the employment situation is so predicated on the financial health of the company that you're getting into, and what you're going to be able to, how you're going to be able to grow personally and financially, and how you're going to be able to, and where that industry is sitting. Like, is it, how vulnerable is it? I think there'll be a lot of people coming out of COVID-19 experiences a bit like what I was saying earlier about coming out of a dot-com crash and just going, I wasn't expecting that. And they'd just be a lot sharper. And it'd be fascinating to see how the tourism industry loses people because of this sort of new vulnerability, even when it starts growing again. And some of the wise heads will approach the tourism industry very differently. I mean, I'm talking from a kind of the management and employee stack. I'm not really talking about the owners that are obviously going to have their own things to sort out. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for tourism, there's always been risk involved in the industry, but I don't think anyone ever imagined the effects that COVID was going to have on the industry to totally decimate it pretty much overnight. We got wind about it late January, early February, and the Chinese borders shut down, and which was a pretty big impact on our business. We had a Chinese specific product, but we didn't realise that was going to continue and eventually close all borders and effectively shut the businesses down.
What was your Chinese specific product?
We had a jet boat tour with a 4-wheel drive trip that had Chinese commentary, Chinese guides.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a big part of our suite of products. So that obviously ceased to exist pretty much overnight, as at the end of was right at the end of the Chinese New Year, and then all the other borders started shutting down, and it was a quick indicator that things were going to get a bit tough. But even then, I don't think people realised just how tough and how long it was going to last for, the country going into lockdown for the period that it did. You mentioned that people's focus is going to be a little bit different moving forward, and I think you're right there that it's like an animal, a prey animal walking through the forest and not really realising what predators are around. And now people are going to be looking a whole lot closer and thinking of effects and possible effects on business that they've never thought of before, because they've had something so unrealistic actually become real.
Yeah, and then so if tourism is sort of parked, unless you've got some money to go buy consent, then what do you think of like when you're talking to your team and that have also gone through redundancy, what do you think the team could do? What industries do you see that they can move into, or have you heard from them?
A few are going back into study, which is great. People are investing in themselves.
Yeah,
and it's a good time to do that when there's not many jobs out there and there's a whole lot of job applicants out there. Why not pause and keep developing yourself?
Yeah.
A few have just taken themselves into positions to see them through, to wait until the right position comes back up for them. We had a fair bit of migrant labour, so a lot of them have now left the country and gone back to their respective countries. And then there's others that are like myself and still thinking about what is the future and what's out there and where do I want to go. I think a majority of us, and I don't mean to speak for everyone else, but are likely thinking that tourism's fun and it's great and it'd be great to get back into, but it's maybe not the most secure industry at the moment.
Yeah. I learned an incantation many years ago, and I think I used it during some of these hard times, which have you heard of an incantation, what that is? Yeah. Do you have any that you use?
No.
So this one just seems to work, and it's all I need is within me now. And the way you say it on a walk is quite a good time, or you're just sort of, when you're concentrating on it, you say, all I need is within me now. All I need is within me now. All I need, so you're shifting the emphasis from all to I to need. All I need is within me now. 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 All I need is within me now.
Right.
And it sort of gets to the core of erasing the stigma, shame of redundancy, because it messes with your mind to think that without work, without all the spoils of the blood, sweat and tears you put into the last enterprise, without all those people, you've got everything. So I used to say that a lot, and I think that, coupled with the other things we talked about yesterday about kind of looking out into these future rising industries, rising tides, and that parental kind of, hey, it's going to be fine. You know, I mean, I really had to think back to the times where I've been stuck, because I sort of dismissed them. When I look back, like there's redundancies, there's firings, there's just failed business endeavors. So it's all there, but we've all got to, the better, the deeper we process them, the more you surprise yourself and others when in 3 years' time they go, how did you go from what you're doing now? And like, I thought when you made redundant, that leap in career is totally possible. Whatever you want that leap to be, whatever you want that leap to look like, but it is a combination of a lot of both sort of inner work and kind of really trying to read the signs of what's going on in the markets, and putting the effort in. But I think that I think you've got to go for things that you feel like that would be cool. Like you excite yourself about it. If I could get to that, I would. So, and that involves more of the passion work of looking at what fires you up, but also how can I how can I take all these tools that I've built up over the years and apply them in a way that we get an amazing result. You know, I talked about had television experience and I wanted to get into technology, and I just discovered this thing was coming along called digital television. It's like, well, if I bring the TV skills and the technology is right there coming through, and I network and I go, I'll tell you one story to kind of close out. So I'd read those two books. I'd gone to Germany and I'd looked at it. I was on holiday in Europe, and I went and had a look at the world's first digital kind of broadcasting suite in Germany. And then I was on my way to London, and then I was going back through San Francisco, stay with some friends, and come home. I was still in my job in regional television, you know, on the, you know, smell of an oily rag, making, you know, dozens of hours of television every week in Invercargill. Not very glamorous. So I went to London, and I had, you know, in those days, we're talking 1998, you had you just had like a name and a phone number in a notebook. And so I was trying to see Brett Harmon at FlexTech. There was a Kiwi guy, ran MTV. FlexTech was a bunch of channels. Went there. Brett wasn't there or couldn't see me, but I met some other people. And, you know, I said, I want to talk about digital television. And they said, oh, there's this thing called interactive television. Really? What's interactive television? Oh, well, you should go see. I tell you, there's a guy who used to work here. He's gone to Sky to launch the digital platform. So I said, okay, what's his name? Richard Ray. Okay. So I go home, I call him. I'm only in London for a week or so. And he can't meet. He's got stuff on, and that's fine. But we had probably a 20-minute chat. And I said, you know, I'm in New Zealand. I've been reading these books about digital television. I want to go from my television experience to digital television to, you know, I heard about interactive television. He said, mate, if I were you, he said, I would go and see in Silicon Valley, I would go and see a company that are making the middleware, the software that goes in the set-top box runs on. They're building all their own set-top boxes called OpenTV, and we're going to launch, you know, in a year's time. So I said, okay. And then I said, thanks very much, Richard. His name was Richard Ray, this guy. We just had that phone call. I then flew to San Francisco, and I was staying with my friends Andre and Nick. And I said to them all about my adventures and what I'd learned and where I was thinking. And, you know, like in terms of the conversations that we've been having about the future, it was as ethereal as that. It was a couple of books, it was a few conversations, and they said, oh, that's cool. And I said, do you know where Silicon Valley is? They said, well, I said, like, how long will it take me to fly to Silicon Valley? They said, no, it's just up the road. And it's really, so I rang OpenTV, and I said, I'm a Kiwi, just wanting to talk about, who do you want to talk to? Is it marketing or product? I was like, marketing. This guy answers, Mitch Berman. He goes, I said, that's Simon Small from New Zealand. Oh, great. Yeah, hi. I'm just here for a few days. Could I come out and have a chat? Sure. You want to come out now? So get in a cab, go out there. It's. I mean, in those days, $100 was like $500 today. Probably more like 1,000, really. And I got this cab ride for 50 minutes or something out to OpenTV to see this guy. we had a quick chat. He actually thought I was someone else. He thought I was some other Kiwi guy. That's why he took the meeting with me, the marketing manager of Open TV. And he just sort of sends me back to reception. And I was like, well, I've only been here, 20 minutes at the most. I don't really want to spend all that money going home. So I said to the receptionist, look, is Craig there? Craig who? Oh, I just met him on the tour when Mitch walked me through the desk and I said hi to him. Craig, let me just see. No, we can't find Craig. Hang on. I found Craig. Craig, it's a chap at reception here. Just tell him it's the Kiwi guy that came through with Mitch. That Kiwi guy that came through with Mitch. He wants to know if you want to go for lunch. He says yes, so we go after lunch. Now it's a campus kind of situation in Silicon Valley. It's not high rises or anything. It's just, but there's a big walk to go to wherever we go to have lunch. I've not been back since 1998, so I have sort of almost childhood memories of this place. And I've told this story more times than I can remember. So this is where it gets nice and crunchy. So we go to lunch. There's about 4 or 5 guys. We have lunch. It's all mixed up. Yeah, and then there's another 4 or 5 people. And then we're all walking back. So, an hour's sort of passed. It's probably a 10, 15-minute walk back to the Open TV where I was going to get in my car and go. So on the way, everyone just sort of walks at different paces and spreads out. And I'm just like walking at the same speed as this random dude. And I turn to him and I say, so I'm like, what am I going to say to this guy? Okay, so when I tell you this next story, imagine if I'd said nothing. Imagine if I'd never said a word to this guy. So we're walking back and I said, so you work here? No, mate. No, I'm from the UK. I said, you're the UK. I was just there. Walk. So where do you work in the UK? I'm at Sky. Okay, UK, I've just been there. Sky, I've talked to one guy for 20 minutes, Richard Ray. You don't know Richard Ray, do you? He's like, I am Richard Ray. I'm Simon Small. I'm that guy, the Kiwi guy that called you. And then he's like, gee, like, what just happened here? Do you mean you're here because I told you to come? I'm like, yeah. Did you know that I was coming here? Did you do? No, this is just, we're walking and talking. So that is how I crack an industry.
Yeah.
From there, a year later, when I said I'm going to go to the UK after we get married, well, my wife said we get married, then we go. 1 week, we finished up with the lowest end of broadcast equipment possible at this small, dinky, farmer-funded TV station that had been bought and sold 3 times. It was now owned by a Christian network. We exited that on like a Saturday. Within a week, I turned up in London. I'd had I think 2 phone calls with one guy at Sky Sports on Richard's recommendation. And I said, should I come earlier? He said, no, you'll be fine. These were, middle of the night phone calls for me where I'm like, honey, I think I might have landed a big fish. and we arrived on a Saturday in London, went down to Penge, South London, stayed in this cubbyhole of my sister-in-law's flat. Like, wasn't big enough for a double mattress in our luggage. So we stayed there, and then on the Sunday, I got the train from the south of London out to the west of London to Osterley. Got picked up in a nice new Volvo by Piers Croton. He drove me to the sky, and it was like, for me, it was like going to Disneyland. It was just like building after building after building after building, all these cars and all this equipment. And, you know, it was just like, I remember him taking me into the playout suite, and there was the Grass Valley mixer, which just went for miles with all these lights and buttons and channels. And he just said, I think he thought I worked at TVNZ or something in the All Blacks department or something. You know, it's just like, so you'll be familiar with one of these. And I was like, yeah, not really, but I won't tell you right now. And then have a cup of coffee. And he's like, so do you want the job? And I haggled for a few days over money. And got in at the pinnacle of the launch of Sky Sports interactive content. It's still going today, but all of that came through that. There's not a TV company in New Zealand that I want to go work for, which means I'm done. But what could I do with a new sector, and how could I get involved as it's evolving? So, final thoughts: the two sectors that I think are red hot and are really worth exploring. One is VR, well, virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality is all kind of being called mixed reality.
Right.
That has leapt 5 years because of this year. So imagine you want to get into virtual reality in 2025. Well, it's here today because of the demand. So that every application that you see on the internet is going to have to be reworked into mixed reality. It's not that different from me going, here's television that I'm kind of done with, and want to bring digital along with that. Here's tourism that I'm kind of done with, I want to bring mixed realities along with that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then the other one is audio. So these are going to go on their own. These are going to go on their own paths. But every application that we see on the phone, like Facebook and Instagram and Uber, in the future, an Alexa skill, so a thing that Alexa can do, will be as big as a Facebook app is on a phone, because voice is so voice is talking to Alexa, talking to Siri, talking to just even, you know, the podcast explosion, the AirPods, right? Voice is, sorry, I'm throwing all this Apple stuff at people, but it's just my just like Rooibos, it's my favorite. But they have this tight, future-focused ecosystem, which is what I really like, and I encourage people to stay at the head of that ecosystem. Don't fall off the path, even though it's expensive. Even though it's an expensive choice, you're working with the best tools of the trade, in my view. But so voice is kind of like a railroad that is going to open up a whole lot of territory, and we have the easiest place to see it is Google Voice and Siri and Alexa skills and and podcasts, but we haven't seen anything yet. And it's a little bit like the days of the internet when it was starting. And all I could do was just think, oh, I could build a website for a shop. I couldn't think beyond that. Like, so I'm a bit like that with audio. I can't actually think what's around the corner. But when someone does it, I'll be like, oh, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? You know? So, and the beautiful thing about what I'm saying is that you don't have to come up with the solution. But if you're looking in the job market and you see something, like I talked to you about the gig at the chatbot company called Ambit.
Yeah.
But what I didn't tell you is why I think chatbots are so exciting. It's augmenting human knowledge, and they're still in their infancy, but the more conversations they're having with customers, these chatbots, and the more investments going into them, the more sophisticated they'll become. And it's a massive industry. It's got, I mean, I would rather just get the job done with whoever's going to serve me. And when I say whoever, if it's a well-constructed, personable, artificial human being who's really able to serve me and is not an idiot and doesn't say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. And I always have to go, let me talk to someone. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Get me somebody now. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. If I don't have to do all of that, but if I'm getting great service, then I would love to use it, because all I want to do, if you're working with utility companies and you're trying to get some obscure thing done, imagine if all the utility companies in the world could deal with you with the intelligence that you have when you have an obscure issue and just get it sorted out, like someone at a 5-star hotel on the concierge desk. Just be like, that's fine, Mr. Small. I've got
it done for you.
Yeah. Actually, Mr. Small,
you'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
Why is actually Mr. Small? Anyway, I don't know why that triggered Siri. So the chatbot thing is another massive. It's another massive industry, and also I look for where could I get into those industries. And even if like you said, what if I take something that's not really on my kind of pathway, for a traditional recruiter or a traditional employer? Now's the time. It's almost like saying, well, I could have gone study, but actually I just want to learn about chatbots. So I took a SDR role at Ambit, and in 6 months, I pretty much know everything about the leading chatbot player. Like you get that first-hand knowledge, and then someone in future is saying, could you do if you came into this operation, would technology scare you to, no, I've done this, I've done that. Oh my God, and you've done the chatbot stuff. So it's about notching up the runs with, I think it's exciting technology that's exciting to you. It's right. Like, it's, if the things that I've said aren't that exciting, even after you've looked at them, I mean, you have to look at them before you can kind of make a call. But even after that, you got to make the call about how it all fits with your world. Okay, any final question?
One that I was thinking of just before we wound up was obviously there's the stigma that goes with redundancies, and what advice do you have or could you give for people that have gone through that negative process and are then finding themselves getting rejected again and again while trying to find re-employment? What tools could they use to remain positive or to keep seeing the value in themselves?
Look, I think the traditional recruitment process is very hard, and I would be saying try and circumnavigate it, and by that I mean get out and try and have coffees with people. Like there's some people call it macro and micro. I'm not used to saying that, but the macro stuff is what I've talked about, which is it's almost like what lake are you going to actually kind of get your work from, right? And I think there's a lot of work to do to kind of figure that out. And then there's the micro, still can't really, it sounds like a microprocessor. The smaller tactical stuff is, okay, I just need to get out there and get income. Like you were saying to me, you're okay for a while. Other people who might be listening just have to get funds as soon as possible. So, I mean, the hygiene factors, your LinkedIn profile, I think you just need to really, really, really sell yourself on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And that means just going through every pixel of your profile, including your photo, including the image behind you, the banner image. The headline is so important. The personal statement. Like by the time you've gone, what are they looking like? How they're presenting? What's important to them visually? What are they saying about themselves as some sort of future focused statement? And where are they at with their personal statement? You haven't even got to what they've done.
Right.
So, and then there's what you've done, and what you've done needs to be, you need to really pick the eyes out of the great things that you've done, and make it sing, you know. So and then there's the posting and the interacting on LinkedIn. I mean, that's another art. But at least getting the profile right. Then there's obviously, people spend a lot of time on their CV. But I think the combination of trying to once you've got your field, and once you've tidied up the way you appear in that to someone who wants to hire you, I would just be contacting and having coffees with people. Coffees with people of influence is I think a really good way to move things forward. Yeah. And talking about bigger sort of macro trends in the industry and what you're interested in and finding out where they think things are going, and so not going heavy on the job, but just doing a lot of that. Zoom coffees, which like to have a Zoom meeting if someone's in Auckland, can't get out of their house. Zoom meetings on coffees. You could do something like start a podcast.
Right.
You could go, okay, well, based on this, like you could call these people of influence in the industry and say, look, I'm just wanting to start a podcast on, well, I'd like to talk to you because I'm thinking about starting a podcast for our industry. Oh, great. Okay. So then you shoot these ideas and then you say, would you like to be on it? Do you know anyone else who'd like to be on it? You do a Zoom call like this. You strip the audio out. You put it up on Anchor. You put it on Spotify. You get someone to make a tiled design. Give it a nice name. And, for the time that you could be spending applying for jobs and getting rejected by recruitment agents before they even put you in front of the employer, you're dealing with the employer's peers, or if it's a hiring person in a company, it may be their boss's peers, and you're creating a little bit of a buzz. And it doesn't even matter if people don't really see it. Seeing it's not really what you're doing. What happens when you do a podcast or an interview is you're building a different kind of a connection.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people say, oh, now how can I help you? I'm like, well, you just helped me. You've been on my show. No, how can I help you? Because they feel like you've helped them because you've created something for them to come on to, a bit of experience, bit of exposure. They can share it on their social media. I mean, think about what we have for free. Everything I just told you. Well, I'm assuming that you consider your phone free. I'm assuming you consider data free, because it's okay, it costs money, but it all costs money. But the toll booth for us to have, like for you and I to have this conversation in 1980 would probably cost, TVNZ $100,000.
Wow.
The cameras, the lights, the outside broadcast track, the satellite time. So when I say it's free, I've got a top-end MacBook Pro and a top-end LG 49-inch monitor, keyboard, trackpad. I've got data here. I'm paying office space here. But in my mind, what I want people to kind of, I just want people to kind of think, you've got to get to a certain level where you just forget about some of these costs, because these are the bloody horses of the 1920s. You got to get a horse. You got to get around, because you can't get a car. But this is just the work. These are just the work tools that we've got to get into, and the best tools possible, as quickly as we can. Just prioritize it. We're not going traveling much. We'll spend money on a trip and not on a computer. It's madness. So these are the tools, and just consider that basically once you've got those tools out, you're gonna have to replace them every 2 or 3 years, but everything else is kind of free. Okay, there's software licenses, but just buy them, because just put them into your kind of your mind that there's so much value in putting out a podcast that 10 million people could watch and could bring you all the work in the world, versus thinking it's hard and I haven't quite got the right tools. So what I'm saying is Zoom's relatively free. Anchor is free. Spotify is free. YouTube is free. Like, we have so much power at our fingertips. So that's what I'd say, because that will positively reinforce the mental cycle coming out of redundancy. You cannot do this thing that I just described and not have it change you, not have it rewire you. You get rewired because of it. I'll just give you one other kind of analogy. When I was, after the TV stuff, I went into selling a software solution, a board portal for managing board papers. And I thought, well, if I do this for a few years, I have this amazing network of people, and I do. I don't really call on them, but what I didn't expect was to get rewired. And there was one moment presenting in the front of 12 people in Luxembourg. I think they had $1 trillion fund. It was JP Morgan, and it was like talking to you. So maybe I've even told you that story before, but this idea will rewire people, and it's actually, do you know what? Going back to the audio, the power of audio, right? What will excite people about chatting with you is this idea that you're building a podcast, or whoever it is. I mean, like what won't really excite them about chatting with you is they're either looking for a job or they're not saying they're looking for a job, but they really are looking for a job. Like it's just not, you got to get into their swim lane. And some people love to give back, but also some people are pretty stretched, and there's only so much giving they can give. And if they don't know you, or if they haven't been told to spend time with you by someone they trust, then they may not, you might strike lucky. But I think the podcast is a winning thing.
Nice. Great advice. Does the rewiring come from the fact that you're focusing on something, you're thinking future forward, and you're getting different perspectives from who you're talking with?
Yeah, I think so, because also everyone's interested in what's next, right? And it's not, and the obstacles of what's coming next are not what you think they are. So, for example, there was a survey done of all the top companies pretty much around the world about what's their number one barrier to artificial intelligence taking off in their company. And it wasn't the technology, it wasn't anything about machine learning or all this sort of stuff that people talk about as kind of selling points of their AI solution. The number one head and shoulders for everybody was help me break down the silos in my business. We've got teams looking after database, teams looking after these different silos of people and technology, and the number one barrier is to break are those silos. So I think the podcast format does several things simultaneously. It's giving some credibility, or you're creating some credibility. You go into the future of just an inquiry, so people are interested in being asked their opinion about where things are going. They're visionary leaders, so they want to talk about their vision. I think this could apply to pretty much any sector. It can be hospitality, it can be food, it can be agriculture, because technology is impacting, and also COVID is impacting the future of everything, right? Mm-hmm. So you're getting rewired because you're having to put yourself on the spot. You're having to do the interview. You're having to set up the interviews. You're having to call the thing something. You have to learn a bit of technology. You're having to ask some questions. You're having to engage and get out of your comfort zone. And then you have to kind of package it up, put it out there, promote it. Right, so it's a massive rewiring.
Cool. Something that I might look into, I think. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Think about, I guess, which subject or which topics I'd like to focus on. And
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, look, thanks for joining us today, Kane, and
Thanks for having me.
Watching. And we'll be back tomorrow, bright and breezy, 9 a.m. Okay.
Thanks, Simon. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.